Hello, everyone. Okay, so this video is going to be kind of fun. It's really a really requested video. So we're going to talk about kids' concentration and focus. This is kind of a big deal. We have so many children with ADHD and ADD and autism and sensory processing. How do we get those kids who are beyond extra wiggly, right? Like the average child is so wiggly and has can have many of these issues. How do we get them to stay on task? So surprisingly, I also was kind of blown away that was not exactly what I thought. So originally, what I thought was it was heavily focused on DHA and how the synapse works with our brains, especially for children. Now, if you don't know about synapse and you don't understand neurons, or I have a really simplified video, so make sure to go watch that one first on just like brain anatomy or brain function for children, and just understanding a little bit about what's going on in there with their thought process. So the thing is, though, is that when we're not understanding things, or the synapse or that brain connection isn't happening, and there's not that power, it's really hard for children to sit still. And secondly, if it's a subject that children are not interested in, why would they even want to sit still, right? So how can we enhance this? So I'm going to give you two tips that are not quite food related. One of them is, but it's not going to give you specific foods to eat. I know that that's always a challenge, right? Especially with picky eaters. And I'm still getting lots of messages on that. I will do a picky eating video. It's coming up, I promise. Um, but what I really, really wanted to share was a couple tips that I did not even realize, okay, um, that were life changing for my daughter. Just so you know, this is something we're living right now, and it's actually created uh, such a great improvement in her ability to sit for online learning, which is what she's being forced to do right now, that I really couldn't wait to share this, because her big problem is also focus, and she's very, very active, and I would never take that away from her. Some children are going to just be, on an average day, more active than others, and we cannot take that away from them. But there is a difference between being an active child and being unable to focus and concentrate um, at all, right? And that's kind of where my daughter was kind of in between. So what I've discovered is not so much the focus on DHA. And if you're wondering what DHA is, like omega 3s are extremely, extremely important, because they are actually what the synapse, so with our, not the synapse, but what the neurons, that connection, it's really, a lot of that is made from DHA. So, and when we think about that, those are like omegas. When we take in omegas, we are able to have a better and stronger connection. But a lot of people were, and I know I'm going to get into a bit of a debate here. So hopefully if you have questions about this, make sure to post them below, and I will share a little bit about that, because science still says that getting DHA from fish source is going to always be above and beyond what you can get from a plant source. Now, saying that, I am a plant-based 90% person. So it's hard sometimes to really understand that, and our children's needs, as their everything is developing and connecting and they're learning, are going to be different than an adult's. I am much more plant-based than my children are. Do I think that children can be plant-based is going to be talked about in another video. The answer is yes, but there are some buts with that, okay? So I'm gonna share a little bit later in another video on that. But what's really important right now is to understand that the building blocks of what they need for that connection with their neurons is really good tools, right? Like everything else, we need tools, and that neuron connection needs tools to create the bond and to elevate the connection, and then to surge that electrical impulse that's going to give the information. Neurons are just basically giving each other information all the time. And so DHA is, even though I wasn't going to talk about it too much, is really important for that. Now, I thought that this was actually kind of one of the most important things. I will do an entire video about DHA and ALA, which are the different sources of omegas, and how one converts into another, and how they are derived from plant sources versus fish sources. And I know that I'm going to get some flack because so many people say, oh, don't do the fish one. There's so much mercury in there. I'm going to tell you right now that getting things from sources like that, there is always ways to support a body from detoxing from many, many of these substances. And again, quality is everything, but I will dive into another video. But if you are incorporating DHA, you're doing a good thing. That's great. Specifically in fish sources, also in plant sources, both of those are great. Okay. And again, video coming up on that soon. Now, but for today, we're going to focus mostly on what I have recently learned is going to support concentration more. And so that is actually proper hydration, which I had no idea. So my daughter used to drink about 3 cups, small cups of water a day, and maybe get some of that from, food, plant-based milk or something in her cereal. And I have learned that for her age, she is 8 years old, she should actually be pretty much having 1.5 liters of water a day. Like that is a lot more than what I even realized. And it is different for children. You can easily Google that. I can easily put that graph up if you would like. But it's really important to notice that our children are dehydrated for the most part, and they are living in a state of dehydration causes lack of concentration. They're very, very interconnected. So now knowing that, so having this understanding, I would strongly recommend, and I mean, this is something that when I work with people and families, we go through assessments, checking out like checking out the schools if they have proper fountains and all that. But when you have the opportunity, and right now where I live, it's at home learning. All it took was for me to put a jug of water beside her and just make sure that I gave her a reward system, which you can do. That's again, like choices on how the psychology of food works with each child is also different in some ways. And so for her, she's very reward based. And so I said, well, you can have, an extra 10 minutes of this if you make sure that today you really focus on throughout the day drinking this entire jug of water. And she did. And I came home and I was off that day, and I went upstairs thinking she was doing something like video games, and they're very limited on that. But she wasn't. She was actually on task, still doing her learning at 3 o'clock, completely focused, completely aware. The second thing, so hydration is very important, guys. The second thing that I really want to share that is extremely, extremely important is blood sugar levels. So what does that mean? It means that in our day and age today, and how society and companies are putting all this food in our packaged foods that we often will give to our children as snacks. And I'm not judging parents. This is like, I'm judging I'm actually judging the companies. I'm so disgusted with this part of it. You'll hear me say it again and again. There are very few companies that rule the world, and all of them are not doing great. So, so what I mean is that for a child, depending on their size and height, should only have, and there's a calculation to figure that out. That's something, again, that I do when I work with families. So if that is something that you're interested, hit me up. But there are ways to figure out, but the average child, okay, so I can give you an average, shouldn't be getting more than about 23 grams of sugar in a day above, okay, so let's slow down, above like sugar content from whole foods. Okay, so that means that when you look at a juice box and it has 21 grams of sugar per serving, that is the child's pretty much all of their daily intake. And let's just say they have bread on top of that, or they have a bar in their lunch, or they have like even anything that doesn't seem sweet. Certain nuts are covered in sugars. So and then on top of it, there's cereal. Let's just say they decided to have cereal that morning. It's a low sugar cereal, but there's about 9 grams. So you've already you've already doubled their amount of sugar, and that creates lack of concentration, lack of focus, lack of the ability to sit still. So it's really important to take into consideration when you're creating a meal plan for your child. And it doesn't have to be complicated, guys. Like, don't hear the word meal plan and be like, oh my God, I have to like freak out and do this. No, when you're looking at what you're going to give your child, be aware, right? Just be slightly aware of juice content. And juice is, again, like a flush of really high amounts of sugar. Now, an example of this too is that in dairy, there's also sugar. Does that count? No, it doesn't, because it's actually, if it's in proper dairy form, which is whole dairy, even though I don't recommend dairy to anyone, don't get me wrong, but if you were to have it, the lactose, if you have whole milk, will be absorbed at a proper rate by the body and used properly. Same with the fruit. All right. So when you eat a whole fruit, it is absorbed because of the fibers and the things in it. It gets absorbed over a longer period of time, not causing sugar spikes and the inability for your child to concentrate. I see it really often. I see children who are eating a lot of gluten-free things, especially autistic children, but they're still in the form of processed foods. And companies are very smart. Like, they've gotten pretty tricky where they will actually mark down that they're using this high quality sugar, right? Where you think, oh, okay, well, it can't be that bad. It's organic cane sugar, or it's this, or it's that, or it's that. In all honesty, don't even look at what kind of sugar it is. Just look at the content of the sugar, and be very conscious also of if it's per the entire serving of what you're eating, or as if it's per 100 grams, or if it's per, for if it's a bar, it's generally the entire bar. But if it's just a big thing of orange juice, about this big, it's usually only for 250 grams or 250 milliliters of the juice. So that's half of it. So be very conscious of how labels are presented to adults. That's it's its own form of trickery these days, and it is very frustrating for me to go into grocery stores and see families and parents and trying to do their best, looking at it. And I've seen this. I've actually um, very kindly informed a woman at the grocery store that her bottle, that she was like, because she was talking about it out loud, and I mean, I was very nice about it because I think that's really, but she was like, oh, it only has this many grams of sugar. And so she was about to put it in her cart, and I picked up the one next to her, and I kind of just said, but it's double. But that amount is actually, you need to put that sugar times four, because it was a big bottle. And I was like, because the amount is for only 1/4 of the bottle. And she was so surprised, and she put it back, and then she was like, thanks for telling me, because I wouldn't have known. Like, you have to really understand that we are often being lied to. And the grocery store, which should be one of the places that we trust the most because it is what we nourish ourselves with, is a place that we should be questioning the most, because it is, as you have as many products in there that are lying to you as there are products that are good for you. So just be aware of that. There are tips for that. Now, to keep this video within 15 minutes, I'm going to pop off, but I hope that that gives you guys some great tips in understanding that it is the sugar content, your blood sugar levels for your children, and drinking adequate amounts of water for their size and height and weight is so, so, so important. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You can easily find a graph on Google that says, this age to this age, you should be drinking this much. Is it hard to get your children to drink water? There is an entire psychology that you can get your children from off of juice to water. I promise, I promise, I promise. Okay. And I'll chat about it in my picky eating video. Bye now.